I currently have a crazy reading schedule that I need to keep up with to avoid having all my books returned on me back to the library. So, I need to discuss what I need to read, and I also figured this would be a good time for me to somewhat wrap up some of these books that I have been reading. There are quite a few that I have read that I don't have on this list, which I wrote on the back of one of those things that's like, hey, come and, I don't know, like, let us replace your windows or something. But I've got a very long list of all the kinds of books that I need to read. I'm going to block out my address, but yeah, it's pretty full. So, first off, The Obelisk Gate. I am reading The Obelisk Gate for the Fantasy Series Book Club, and I have finished it at this point in time, which is great. This is actually a reread because I did read it earlier this year. I don't know, sometime earlier this year, and I enjoyed it, but I also forgot what happened in the book, and we're supposed to discuss it. And I feel bad because I think I picked the 5th season trilogy, but thus far it's been the one where most people are like, I don't like this, or it's too heady and I'm not going to be participating, or whatever it is, and I don't want the book club to die because of my pick. So, Stone Sky is on this list as well. As for The Obelisk Gate itself, I did give it a lower rating this time after I finished it. It still is a 3.5, I believe, and I initially, I think, gave it a 4. But at this point, I just felt like there were so many times when the characters would be about to explain the revelation they were having, where they'd say, like, it was unbelievable, I just realized at this moment it was, and then they would just not finish the thought, which was so frustrating, because as a reader, I sometimes want you to tell me what you just figured out as a person, because otherwise it's like those very annoying moments in every piece of fiction where the person is like, but how did you get here? What's the big secret? And they're like, no time to explain. We have to run. And then they just die in the next scene and you never find out what they were talking about. Not to say that the characters all die in the book, but I'm just saying it's the same feeling of being blue-balled by the characters. I think that's the right way of describing it. I also did read Moon of the Crusted Snow, and this was a book that I had been dying to get to for the longest time, and I will say I was a little disappointed, unfortunately. Partially, I think that's because I did absorb it as an audiobook, and I am obviously very pro-audiobook on many, many things if you've been around on my channel at all before, but this one I think would have been a lot better as a physical book, and that's just because when the narration was giving the dialogue from all the different perspectives, as there are many, many different characters in the community here, there was no difference in inflection or in voice characterization or anything, so it became so difficult to really tell the characters apart that many times I started to confuse certain characters for each other. And that was a major problem for one of the plot points that happens near the end of the story. And I guess that led me to just feel like this is a very obvious conclusion anyway, and there's the mix-up of all the different characters that I didn't feel as excited by it as I thought I was going to be. But I did still think that it was a very cool way of interpreting an apocalypse from a very different perspective than most dystopian books that we are very, very used to reading. We are so used to the kind of like YA dystopian or something of like pretty much a white protagonist who is like, I'm going to go out there and just change everything and then I will rule the country afterwards somehow. And instead, this is much more down to earth, first of all. And secondly, it is not at all like any other dystopian book I've really read before. There's much more of like the creeping dread getting into the dystopia because it is not really broadcast in any way, as this is a community of indigenous people who don't really regularly rely on the same kinds of things that people out in the, I guess, outside of communities really would. In general, they are already very, very good at, trapping animals and being able to like live with nature in a much more humane way. They don't take more than they really need, and they also do so with grace and ceremonial process. And when the apocalypse eventually comes to them and they lose all electricity, the indigenous population is more equipped, it seems like, to handle this than a lot of the outsiders who start to come to their borders and ask to be a part of this because they're starving and they need something. I feel like it was a very interesting way of talking about an apocalypse in the first place, but it also was very cool because you're seeing it from this perspective of the many different people that are inside of the community. I still enjoyed it quite a bit, even though I didn't love it entirely, and I think that's because there was still a lot of difference in those characters. Even though it was difficult for me to tell all of them apart, you could see there were a lot of the people who still held on to their native language and other people who were more so assimilating to more like English-speaking ways, and how they were trying to pass on certain traditions, certain kinds of medicine making, and the tradition of language and everything that was being passed on, and how a lot of that can either be lost or actually rediscovered due to something like an apocalypse in which many of the creature comforts are now gone. I just finished today a book called Do the Work. This felt like if you just took Shia LaBeouf or like a Nike ad and you made it a book. It's just basically saying, like, just do it. And I think the idea behind it is supposed to be, like, reassess your life, figure out, do you need a kick in the pants because you just aren't working hard enough at the goals that you want in life, or whatever. In two ways, I could see this being, you know, a book that is either loved by many because they need the kick in the pants and they want to just be told flat out, like, you're not working hard enough, so just do it. And then there's also, of course, the side that's like, well, realistically, there are many circumstances which would actually stop someone's progress in achieving their dreams, most of which are not things that they can control. So I fully understand the idea of, like, do what you can within your scope, that what you can control to make your life better, to better your relationships with other people. But I also think that there is a lot of neglect for privilege and for the commodification of this sort of like hard work that is just so easy you can just go out and do it. And also, I did not appreciate the fact that the author was saying, like, the person that I think is like so amazing at doing all this stuff is my wife because she takes care of our kid because of these reasons. And I'm like, do you take care of your kid? Or you just spend the whole time telling people to work harder? I did not rate that book because I felt like I could see it from both perspectives, and I just didn't feel like figuring out what that would be in the number of star ratings, so we're moving on. I read The Wild Robot as well. I didn't really care for that book very much. I think I gave that 2 stars. That was very okay for me. This is a story about a robot who washes up on the shore of an island, which is generally inhabited by all of the wildlife there and nobody else. There are no humans, and the other robots that crash landed on this island all were destroyed. But this robot is designed to have, like, helpful characteristics, I guess you could say. So it shows up and it learns how to be based on all the different animals it interacts with. So it learns to speak with the animals, it learns to be nice, and to have some sense of, I guess, like, compassion and humanity that is instilled into its voice more than just being purely robotic. And it eventually becomes part of this community, even though a lot of the animals are like, I hate that bitch. So the thing is, I didn't hate that, I guess, but it just felt like, even though this was a 4-hour audiobook, it felt so long for what it was, because it just felt like a children's tale that could have been like a picture book, and it was more and longer and everything like that, and it almost felt like a little like Aesop's Fables that was just stretched very, very, very far for what it actually needed to be. And I guess I just didn't really like the characters that much. Brightbeak was my favorite, which is the robot's goose son, which, again, this sounds like it would be perfectly right up my alley, so I don't know what went wrong here. But the robot themselves and all of the other animals were just a little annoying for my taste. We didn't vibe as well as I thought we would have, so unfortunately not going to be continuing with that one. Well, no, fortunately for me, because I didn't enjoy it, but hey, it is what it is. What am I reading right now? A lot of things. Actually, I was reading a bunch of books and they all got returned on me before I finished them, which was so frustrating, so I had to place holds on everything again and wait for it all to come in. But one of those is Close Encounters with Humankind. I have a little bit of it left. This is one book that I had such a huge book crush on, and book crushes for me are like books that I am like dying to read, but I'm also scared to pick up because I don't want to be disappointed by them. But I finally decided like it's time to do it. And November just felt like the month for certain books that like they are associated with a certain month and it was time to read them. So I picked that book up. I have to say it's a little bit boring, which is very disappointing. But it is a book about anthropology, about human origins, and that stuff is usually extremely exciting to me because that was one of my favorite classes in high school. But it's just not doing a whole lot for me right now. It is just talking a lot about like Australopithecus and the different fossils that were found and many scams that happened throughout time in which people thought that they found the oldest possible fossil for certain things. And the stories themselves are engaging as a concept, but I also think the execution is a little bit too wordy for what it needs to be. Like, I think that it could work better if it had a bit more of like an injection of storytelling, creative writing that were more of a part of it, rather than it just purely being like, this is what happened, then this, then this, then this, then this. And there's like some like little quirky bits of writing in between everything, but it seems a little bit out there because the rest of it doesn't have that little bit of comedic timing with the rest of it. But I will finish that, and I also didn't get to finish at the time Follow Me to Ground, which my hold just came in for. And Follow Me to Ground is a weird story about a girl and her father who pretty much like take people who are injured and put them in the soil, and then they are fixed afterwards. And so people are like, there's something weird going on with this family because obviously they do that, but there's also just something weird about their practices and stuff that the daughter doesn't really know either. So I only got a very, very short percentage of the way through this book before it just got returned on me by accident. I don't know what's been going on with audiobook apps recently, but it's just been very strange. And another one is Beholder by Ryan LaSala, which I have been dying to read for the longest time because I love Ryan LaSala's writing so much. He's literally like the coolest person. Overall, the book is so cool because in YA thrillers that I've read by many different authors, I feel like they generally tend to follow the same progression. So you'll see an introduction to a character, probably an introduction to a love interest, eventually something bad happens, and the rest of the book is just spent with them like figuring out what the mystery thing is, and at the end they're like, bam, there's the plot twist, and we're done. Ryan LaSala takes that whole formula and throws it into a blender and destroys it, and then makes something way better. Because it's always like, here is a queer main character who is just already cool. They already have a lot of this like deep lore and history that is infused in the kind of character that they are. And then they're going to just throw plot twists at you from the beginning already when you're like, I'm clearly already invested in this and I'm afraid. And I love that. Everything that Ryan has written that I've read so far has been a joy. And I love it. I love everything that he's written. So I haven't yet read Bedazzled by him, but I'm extremely excited to finish out Beholder, which I finally just got back again from my audiobook app. And I also was almost done with Divine Rivals when it got returned on me. Also, 2 hours left in that audiobook. I was really, really enjoying it. I get why people enjoy it so much, but I also thought it was a little strange because I feel like it just is like a World War II romance that isn't in World War II. It's just fantasy war instead. I really loved all of the lore bits when we got to talk about like the different gods and the reason that these wars are happening, but I also really enjoyed just the historical fantasy stuff aside, like the historical part of it was also just really, really fun for me too, because clearly these are people with like, not as much technology as we're used to having in the modern day, who have to make do with what they have. They're using these magical typewriters to talk back and forth with each other, but it's mostly just like the pen pal trope, which is so much fun. And it is so similar to one of my favorite musicals, She Loves Me. So it's just so enjoyable all around with the one person knows, but the other person doesn't, and then they're writing to each other, and they're in love with each other, but they won't say it, and we're finally getting to that point where I'm like, they know. It's so exciting. So I really want to finish that when my hold comes back. What else am I reading right now, you ask? I'm so glad you asked, because let me tell you about some more books also. Before this video started filming, I just started The Woman in Me by Britney Spears, none other than. I have always been a huge Britney fan, but I also don't know the lore of Britney as much, other than with her court case, of course, which was very highly publicized, and I don't know anybody who doesn't know about the case. I did see somebody say today that the book itself wasn't written perfectly, but there is a lot of tea in it, and I do love tea. Big tea drinker for me. So those are the main ones at this point in time, as well as one other. The other book I have also started today is Having and Being Had, which originally I just thought was going to be a love story for some reason, like having love and being had by someone, but it is actually about capitalism, like everything else. Having and Being Had talks about what it means to, own things, what it means to be a part of a capitalistic society, and how that works in relation to people who obviously have more or less of a standing in class structure. And I guess it is kind of an examination of living that type of lifestyle, at least from what I have read so far. It does seem to be quite well written and well researched, so I am enjoying it a lot, but I also think it's one of those that I'm trying to take slower, because I don't want to just speed through it. I want to really genuinely think about all of the different points that they're trying to make here. Those are the main things that I have been reading thus far, and that I am currently reading now. The last couple things I just want to go over in this video are all of the other things that I also want to read relatively soon. Those being, and I'm just going to read off of the list now: Wildfire, The Mountain in the Sea, City of Orange, highly excited about that one, White Cat, Black Dog, How the World Really Works, Life Worth Living, The Best of All Possible Worlds, and then a whole bunch of other books that I'm not going to go over right now because, man, I'm so tired and my back hurts. That's the main thing at this point, and hopefully some of those seem really exciting to you. So if they do, let me know which of those you've read or that you're excited to read. I'm Rachel, this is Let Me in the Library, and I'll see you next time. Bye!